The show begin. I'm going to call this meeting to order pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023 on March 29, 2023. Governor Maura Healey signed into law an act making appropriations for fiscal year 2023 to provide for supplementing certain existing appropriations for the certain other activities and projects. This act includes an extension till March 31st, 2025 of the remote meeting provisions. Today is January 29th, 2025. The select board meeting will be conducted via remote participation by the board. I will grant permission to Westwood Media Channel to record the meeting and live streaming, and anyone else who wishes to do that. In addition to that, I'd like to mention that if residents would like to participate or ask questions or submit comments, residents should use the QA feature, and Tish, correct me if I'm wrong. Residents should use the QA feature in Zoom to submit a question in writing to be read by the chair, or you, Tish, and use the raise your hand feature to be recognized to speak. And there will be a 2-minute limit, and I do have my timer. Did I get that right, Tish, Rob?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks, Tish. So let's get down to our scheduled action, 6 p.m. FY26 budget discussion. Who would like to lead off?
I'd love to, Joe.
Okay, Rob.
So good evening to everybody. If you watched our last meeting, you know that we had a bunch of discussions regarding the fiscal year 26 budget and some of the difficult decisions that we have to make in trying to close the current budget shortfall of $1.5 million to get to that balanced budget while continuing to deliver level services to our residents. I think anyone who watches those discussions would reasonably characterize them as professional, respectful, and cordial. As our colleague, Ms. LeBlanc Cummings, so eloquently highlighted, this board has been incredibly supportive of Chief Lund and the men and women of the Westwood Fire Department. The three of us have done the following with respect to Westwood Fire. We settled a collective bargaining agreement with the union after a long and publicly contentious time. We replaced the chief with a well-qualified and well-respected member of the Westwood Fire Department family in Chief Lund. We approved the addition of 2 incremental firefighter positions last May. We supported the promotions of 4 firefighters to lieutenants and reclassifying our captains to the title of deputy chief to help improve the overall command structure, as well as being able to help them be eligible for training that they might not otherwise be able to participate in. And we continue to this very day to strongly support and advocate for the replacement of Fire Station 1. All three of us stand by our desire to hire 2 more firefighters to reach the staffing needed to have 11 firefighters on shift 24/7, 365. Joe, you've consistently advocated for this since joining the select board, which is understandable given your history as once a member of the Westwood Fire Department. The board last time reaffirmed our desire to get to that staffing level, but I also highlighted our obligation to do so in a fiscally responsible manner only when there were appropriate and sustainable funding sources to provide for those incremental bodies. Now, during that discussion, Joe, you had displayed a spreadsheet that was suggesting potential expense line cuts. Now, in fairness, we had no advance notice you'd be doing this, nor did you leave the spreadsheet on the screen really long enough for us to properly ingest or process and have any meaningful discussion amongst ourselves as a board. You did say that you'd send the spreadsheet after the meeting through the town administrator's office for us to be able to review more thoroughly. We did receive it, so thank you. An important part of those deliberations was to provide guidance, clear guidance to Chris and Stephanie on the priorities of this board, which they would then pursue in pushing to the finish line for our February 3rd meeting to present a balanced budget for us to discuss, vote, and send on to FinCom for recommending to town meeting. We highlighted the fact that we still needed to close that very large gap of $1.5 million to get to the balanced budget, and that adding these additional positions only pushes that gap larger, and we didn't see a path to those 2 firefighters in the fiscal 26 budget. I know you were not pleased with that because on Friday morning you took to Facebook and you said, just to be clear, I proposed a cost-neutral way of adding 2 additional firefighter paramedics using a similar method to what I and others have had to do in the private sector. It simply wasn't given a chance to be reviewed. That's the tragedy. So tonight, in an effort to avoid tragedy, we're going to give your suggestion a full and fair hearing. We'll review both your math and the veracity of your process behind your recommendations. So first, let's talk about how you did it. I'm going to just show your spreadsheet because you did send it to us, so we appreciate that. And let's go there. Can you see that screen? No. Hold on a second.
Yeah, we can see the script.
No, those are my notes to myself.
There you
This
go.
is your spreadsheet, yes?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So as you had said, you took the $2.5 million you identified and took either 2 or 2.5% from it. So let's start with the end in mind, right? You say that you were trying to provide a cost neutral way to add these 2 firefighters. Now, we have been told by Stephanie that the fully baked cost of adding those 2 incremental firefighters is $349,000 to cover salaries, benefits, and the associated overtime. So that should be the number that we're solving for a truly cost neutral solution.
Rob,
Now,
can I stop you for a minute? I'm sorry. But what select board meeting was that 349,000 put out there?
Stephanie sent that to us, and so we know that.
What
all-
meeting?
We all know it.
I just want to go back to the tape.
You don't have to go back to the tape, you can go back to your email. So that $349,000 is what the fully baked cost is per our budget director. Now, 3 of the larger expense areas in this are DPW at $566K, the police at $357K, and fire at $300,000. So those 3 departments of your 2.5 account for roughly 50%. That adds up to about $1.2 million that you were using upon to base your calculation. Now, that money is not, it pays for things like fuel for police cars and fire trucks and DPW vehicles. It pays for the maintenance of the essential equipment, and it pays for things like radio and safety gear, all essential things to provide those critical town services. Now, that's just me looking at what I can see in the budget. We still haven't heard from the department heads to understand the real operational impact. And that was what I had asked at our last meeting was appreciated the effort, wanted to understand what the operational impact was. So in my estimation, and again, I'm looking at, the line items that make up those big numbers, about 95% of those funds should probably be excluded from the base of the calculated 2% savings. Further, something like the Finance and Warrant Commission expense line of $46,000. Now, $37,000 of that is printing the warrant article books that get mailed to every home in Westwood. So if you're suggesting we shouldn't mail those books and move to an electronic form, that could yield significant savings. I'll grant you that. However, we're obligated by the town charter bylaws to provide those books. So the only way to cut that expense would involve a change to section 138.4 of the town's bylaws. And that would require a vote at town meeting and therefore is not really a viable option for this year. But it could be worth revisiting before we appoint a bylaw review committee. Moving next to the Board of Assessors, which has an expense line of $33,000. By my review of the details, $29,000 of that is spent on revaluation of personal property and/or on-site inspections of the properties being revalued. And much of that work is prescribed by the state, so I think you'd have to exclude that from your totals as well. The town clerk's line item is just under $80,000, yet 3/4 of that is the administration of our town and state and federal elections. Therefore, we can't include that 60 in what's available to cut. The collector's expense budget is roughly $90,000, but when you scratch below the surface, $36,000 of that $90,000 is spent on the service used to collect ambulance receipts, which seems like pretty short money when you think about the 1.7 in unreserved funds that are currently in the ambulance receipts accounts. Another 27,000 is related to processing the mails to send out tax bills, and there's another 17,000 for lock boxes. So of that 90, about 80 would have to be removed from what's available to cut. There was I know you said we'd be able to poke holes in it, and I'm not trying to do that. I know there was an honest mistake on the building maintenance line. It looked like you had it listed at $63,000. Looking at where you probably pulled that from, it looks like you may have moved a column over, and the 63 was actually the difference between last year's and this year's budget expense. The actual budget for building maintenance is actually $1.157 million. The vast majority of things that it covers are electricity, gas, maintenance, custodial service, landscaping, and more. And I think we'd all agree that lights and heat and working plumbing and clean buildings are minimum operating standards for our public buildings. But again, the difference is a data entry error. So those are just my observations looking at your document from the very same source document you used to make your suggestion. I think we all agree that there's not excessive waste in the discretionary budgets that are sitting around. I have tremendous faith in our professionalism of our department leaders and the fiscal discipline they exercise. As I said last week, I respect the effort that you put into this for, putting the discussions out. And so we're having that discussion tonight. But, you're looking to invest in these additional firefighters. And so you have to acknowledge that it is an investment. Your original math got you to, as you can see here, $186,000, $188,000 on average, right? So that's only halfway to the 349 that we need to be truly budget neutral. So there will need to be cuts if you want to push for these 2 incremental firefighters as part of this FY26 budget. I know we have asked you on several occasions in open sessions, what are things that you're willing to cut to fund these incremental positions? Other than this you have yet to answer those questions. In fact, you've been so reticent about recognizing what to cut that you took the extraordinary and unnecessary step of being the lead petitioner on a citizen's petition article for $23,000 for an 11th yard waste pickup. In your petition, you don't even specify a source of fund for that incremental spending. At our last meeting, I even suggested staying with 10 pickups and simply returning one back to July in order to be able to afford the extra pickup and then take any negotiated savings that Todd's able to do and apply it towards the budget gap. You didn't even react to that. So I'm going to stand by the direction I gave at the last meeting. I want a balanced budget capable of delivering level services, meaning maintaining all the services and programs provided to residents today. I don't support additions to the operating budget without a commensurate source of recurring and sustainable revenue. So as I see it, we have 3 options. We can exclude these 2 incremental firefighters from the fiscal 26-year budget. We can make significant specific cuts to town services to offset that $349,000. Or we can make the case for an operational override, because that will provide recurring sustainable sources of funds for these positions. Those are the 3 options before us as the elected board responsible for the budget, and they are, quite frankly, the same options before the community. Finally, I was disappointed in your taking to social media. Our job here is to have thoughtful, respectful deliberation of facts. We don't have the opportunity to discuss these things outside of this forum due to open meeting law. Is that inconvenient? Yeah, sure. I'd love to meet you for a coffee and talk about some of these things outside of here. Absolutely. But that's the law that we're bound by. Taking to social media to me is unbecoming of because your select board colleagues, you're undermining us. You chose to run for the seat. You chose to enter the arena and therefore accepted entry into the tournament of ideas. And I'm confident I've demonstrated a willingness to be open-minded, creative, and responsive to new thinking. So I encourage you to have the courage of your convictions and the bravery to debate them in a collegial and respectful way here with us, as opposed to a venue where you know we can't respond without violating open meeting law. In other words, I would ask you not to duck the difficult conversation and run to social media. You're better than that. I just thought I'd put that out there for the universe.
The universe appreciates it. Mary Ann, your turn.
Thank you, Joe. I too have a few comments and also some questions that I'd like to raise relative to our meeting last week. The thrust of our budget discussion was focused on whether we can this year fund one of our express priorities, the addition of 2 additional firefighters in the department. And I just want to say that this board has recognized on numerous occasions the heroic and life-saving work that is done by the Westwood Fire Department. It is beyond debate that response times matter and that seconds matter in response times during emergencies, which is why we have proposed that the new FS1 be built at its existing location, as it is the best available location to minimize response times. I would like to share a little bit publicly about where I'm coming from when we discuss these matters and why my family and I are personally hold the members of the Westwood Fire Department in the highest regard, and why we have had to personally rely upon them on more than one occasion. In 2005, our firefighters responded to a carbon monoxide incident at my home during a major blizzard when I was home alone with my 3 kids, 2 toddlers, and a 6-year-old. And although we needed to be transported by ambulance to the hospital that day, the outcome was much better than it otherwise might have been had they not responded as quickly as they did. And then in 2018, we had a house fire. Everyone was okay. And while we had to rent another home in Westwood while our house was gutted down to the studs, the structure of the home was saved because of the fire department's prompt response. I am acutely and personally aware that response times matter, and personally grateful to the Westwood Fire Department for what they have done for me and my family. And for those of you who know me and who know my record of public service in this town, you know that I have been a vocal advocate for the fire department service since I first served on the Finance and Warrant Commission, and particularly with my work on FinCom's Public Safety Committee. My decision to run for the Select Board was in large part motivated by my interest in continuing to strengthen the investments that we have made in public safety in Westwood, and to replace our main fire station, the need for which was formally recognized over 10 years ago. And I am proud of the work of this board in bringing forward a plan for the design of a new FS1, which town meeting approved a year ago, approved the design. And I'm going to keep working to get that new fire station built because I believe it is urgent need for the health and safety of our firefighters and the protection of our residents. And I'm also proud of our work in adding 2 new firefighters to our roster last year, especially as we had not added any new firefighters since University Station came online. All of that said, I believe that as a select board member, my primary responsibility is that of fiscal responsibility, because we owe that duty to our taxpayers and because all our town services flow from our strong and solvent financial position. As you know, the town has for many years enjoyed a very strong financial position and has been repeatedly commended at the national level for excellence in financial reporting. Our financial policies require us to present budgets that are structurally balanced with ongoing expenses supported by ongoing revenues. Our policies specifically state that, quote, particular attention shall be given to sustainability of staffing levels, close quote. There's a good reason for this. as we want to maintain the level of service that we have, and also to keep our commitment to all of the people that work for the town, including our public safety staff. So all of that brings me to a discussion about last week's meeting, and I first want to discuss process. As a board, I believe we should be engaging in robust, creative, and collaborative discussions about the challenges that face us. I applaud and encourage creative ideas as to how to fund our priorities. Joe, I have also seen your post on social media, which indicated that the proposal you made last week was not given a chance to be reviewed. And with respect, I think it is inaccurate to say that we did not review your proposal. In fact, we adopted the proposal with respect to the elimination of the word publication as a way to help close the budget gap. But respectfully, not having had the opportunity to review the proposal in advance, much as you had done with the slide you presented to us before one of our meetings back in June, that did not allow for the opportunity to review and conduct any due diligence regarding that proposal in advance. And given our fiscal responsibilities, what I am not going to do is to make a decision on the fly with respect to reducing the level of service to residents in town. I think residents are expecting us to make thoughtful decisions premised upon due diligence, particularly as to budget cuts for services, including public safety. So going forward, I suggest that we aim as a board to work collaboratively as possible with one another, and to say whatever needs to be said during our meetings and not afterward in a social media forum or otherwise, recognizing that we're not always going to agree, but we can disagree with one another respectfully in our open forum. And so since last Wednesday, I have had the opportunity to conduct some due diligence with respect to the other proposals you'd made, and I'd like to discuss them briefly and ask some questions if I may. First, regarding cell phone usage, as folks may or may not know, cell phones are used by our public safety staff, police officers, firefighters, and their service is actually in a public safety network, which gives their service precedence in the event of an emergency that causes outages. And some of our DPW staff also have town cell phones, which they use in communication with fire and police when coordinating emergency response. I determined that of the 73 cell phones issued to town staff, at least 73% of them are used by fire, police, DPW, sewer, health, and human service departments. I further understand that as part of our ongoing comprehensive emergency management plan, we're actually looking to expand the use of the emergency, the public service network that I mentioned, and also that the police department actually has a need to expand the number of cell phones issued to them. So because the proposal to cut out half of our cell phone use would reduce the cell phone use of public safety and DPW, that is not something that I can support. Given all of that, is that a proposal that both of you support?
I don't support taking the cell phones down by the proposed amount, no. I think that, you have made it abundantly clear that those are vital to our public safety and our emergency management response.
Fine.
You agree, Joe, that that's not a something we want to do as a board?
I think I prefer to share a little more information with you when I get my opportunity.
Well, we're talking about cell phones now, and so please, I mean, if you have something you want
I
to
can
add.
show another proposal where there's no impact on the cell phone budget. I'm prepared to do that.
Okay, well, I was just addressing the proposal that you made with respect to cell phones.
Let me be clear. That was a model that we could use and evaluate and discuss amongst ourselves. I was not saying that had to be, in fact, Rob, I remember you even acknowledged the fact, I just pulled these numbers off a PDF, okay? Mary Ann, that was just, there were opportunities, cell phones being one of them. I just fell back on what happens in the hospital sector. So if you don't want to touch the cell phones, if you're happy with that, I'm fine. I can still support my position.
Joe,
Yeah.
I think what part of what Marianne is saying, and I don't mean to speak for you, but I mean, I
No,
feel
help me out.
no, is that, you know, if you have something new, you're again going to spring that on us without an opportunity to fully vet, right? So we're sitting here addressing what you put in front of us last time, and when we looked at it last time, we said, okay, respect the effort, want to understand what the actual operational impact is and what is actually viable out of this. And so, you know, I've looked at some things, Marianne seems to have looked at some other things, and, you know, each of us looking at what was presented are responding to and having the discussion, because this is the only place we can do that. So, you know, that's, I don't know what you know, if you're going to put something new up, how would you like us to respond to that? We're going to have to put that off to another meeting till we have the appropriate amount of time to ingest whatever it is you're going to share.
Well, I looked at the tape today. No, that's okay. That's fine. What do you want me to say, Marianne?
Look, I have some other questions,
Okay.
unless anybody has something else they want to say about the cell phones. No? Okay. So I'd like to just move on. I have some questions regarding the proposal that we cut our municipal expenses across the board by 2 or 2.5%. And since last Wednesday, I've had the opportunity to consult with a number of our department heads to gain their input on what such cuts would mean. First, a cut of 10% or more of the expense line for veterans services would translate into a cut of benefits for veterans. I am not willing to do that, are either of you?
Not at all.
Where'd the 10% come from?
I said 2%. If I said 10, I'm so sorry. I'm
You
talking
did.
about the proposal to cut 2% of expenses across the board.
In fairness to Joe, you did misspeak there and say 10%. So,
Oh,
you know,
forgive me.
that's okay. That's
Sorry,
okay.
Joe. I meant to say
No,
2%.
I'm the one with the bad hearing, so I need to double check.
No, I'm so sorry. I meant to say 2%. Thank you for
Look,
correcting.
we don't, I wasn't putting this down as gospel. I'm saying this is a model that we can review and discuss.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to do now. I mean, given that I've had the opportunity to do some due diligence,
Sure, go ahead.
that is one thing that concerned me. I've also spoken with Fire Chief Lund and Police Chief Silva, both of whom told me that a reduction of 2% of their expenses would make things very tight in their respective departments, and I'm not comfortable in doing that. Are either of you comfortable in doing that?
I am.
I had further conversations with Chief Silva as well, and one of the things that he had highlighted to me was that, you know, he is more stingy with the town money than he is with his own money, right? So the idea that there's, you know, a line that you can equate to 2% of his $357,000, when so much of it goes to things that are either essential to performing the service or potentially contractually mandated by the collective bargaining, right? Joe, you know, some of the training is, you can't cut that, right? So some of the travel is part of the training. So you can't cut that. So again, I have not gone through with the chief or any other department head and gone line by line inside of that, but I'm just using what is available to me and you in the document that we had. And there were things that were really obvious that we couldn't include as part of your 2.5% cut or 2.5% cut. So that's all. I went deeper in looking at what's behind those bottom line budget numbers to understand operational impact to a layperson. And at some point, I'd love to hear from the department heads or Chris to know what those cuts would mean to the department and their ability to deliver the service.
So if I could continue as another example as to what an across the board cut of 2% would do. As to our animal control department, as you both know, that is a contracted service that we have. And to reduce the budget by 2% would mean that we'd be under budget for the contract price, which is something that I'm also not willing to do. Is that something that you both are willing to do?
No, I think we have to abide by the contract that we have in place.
I guess I'd have to take a look at that contract.
Okay. Regarding the library, what I have learned is that our Chapter 78 funding, which we receive for the library service, is dependent upon the library sustaining a level of spending in order to be eligible for that funding. And I also learned that a cut of 2 or 2.5% might also jeopardize our membership in the Minuteman network, which is really critical to our delivery of service in the library. So for both of those reasons, the proposal to cut the library's expenses by 2 or 2.5% is not something I can support. Is that something you would both support?
That is information that I'd like to understand a little bit more, but logically, based on how you've presented it, if it puts our participation in the Minuteman at risk or potentially, what is the implication you said of the first item if we fall below a certain spend level?
Yeah, there is a formula, and I actually see that a number of our library trustees are with us, and perhaps they could say this more precisely than I would, but I understand that there is a certain 3-year average of spending that needs to be shown, and that spending needs to be sustained at a certain level. The state wants to see that we're buying books for the library and other important items. And if you're unable to show that level of spending, then we are at risk of losing the Chapter 78 funding.
So
Thank
so the library's $412,700,000 budget cannot sustain an $8,000 cut.
I am telling you what's been reported to me, Joe.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I am as well. So, given, I just gave a number of examples of what an across the board 2% cut would mean. Rob, you gave some other examples as to other departments. And for those reasons, I am not in support of an across the board cut in expenses in the municipal budget of 2% or more, given the very tight budgeting of expenses by our departments. Are we all in agreement that a 2% cut across the board is inadvisable?
I'm not in agreement.
Okay, well, I think that if you want to do it as a 2% across the board, there are things that you have to take out of the total that are not eligible to be included in what you take 2% from.
Sure.
Okay, so for example, Marion, I'm sorry, are you done?
I have just a couple last things
Absolutely.
I do want to say, if I may, which is just to wrap up to say that, per the charter, This board has given direction to the town administrator and our finance director to deliver a balanced budget to us at our February 3rd meeting. And while we do not have recurring revenue to support the hiring of 2 new firefighters in FY '26, we are going to be hearing a public safety communications presentation also at our February 3rd meeting, which the members of this board have all received individually with our public safety team, including Chief Lund and Chief Silva. And that may provide an opportunity to reallocate savings in the operational budget in a future fiscal year to other operational expenses, perhaps in the next fiscal year. And I look forward to discussing that. But otherwise, I think I have asked the questions I wanted to. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. Rob, I'm sure you have some more.
You know what, Joe, I'll let you go because there's plenty more to discuss, and I'm sure that there's going to be more that you have to say. So let's give you an opportunity to talk as well.
Eyes wide open. I'm ready, Rob. Bring it on.
No. Well, okay. I mean, so if you want to talk about something like the police expense line of $357,000, $65,000 of that is training. I'm going to guess that that is required under the collective bargaining agreement. I'm sure that the uniform allowance is also at, part of that agreement, and it is a $50,000 line expense. Equipment maintenance at $10,000, vehicle maintenance at $50,000, radio maintenance at $17,000, telephone at $34,000, gasoline at $60,000, police supplies at $20,000, dues and membership at $20,000. I'm going to guess all of those things are not things that any of the three of us would propose cutting. So that's the vast majority of the police detail inside of the 357. So if you want to take 2%, I think you have to take out of consideration the things that cannot be cut for operational purposes or as part of collective bargaining agreements.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I don't disagree. Rob, I just said, this is how I've gone down this road in the hospital sector. We didn't get to pick and choose what we could cut.
Okay. And I'm saying that I'm looking at the detail of what those expense lines are that haven't really grown. They have been essentially, very, very tight for a long time. And so to me, that's good fiscal management on the part of the department heads. So if you want to set a target number that we should try to find, but going back to what you presented to us last time, we have to acknowledge that 180 or 185 or whatever the number was that you had is only halfway to what we need to fund these two positions.
Rob,
you-
I'm
can you
glad
agree with that?
you said that. I'm so glad, because I'm just looking at an email from Stephanie that says 92,000 for a firefighter position. So I have no idea. I mean, I can inflate numbers till the cows come home, but let me, you know what's really important? I really need to share with you why I think this is so important.
While you're pulling that up,
Yep.
Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the total cost of two firefighters would be $185,000 in base salary, $64,000 in benefits, $100,000 to overtime to cover, which was the same concept as was done for the current fiscal year, which brings you to a total of $349,000. Am I misrepresenting anything that you have said to us?
That's not a misrepresentation. I emailed that to you when I was asked for a cost out of it, and that's what I would recommend if you were going to fund the firefighters. It's similar to what we did last year. that's what I would recommend including. Yes,
And to be clear, you didn't email that just to me. You emailed that to the three of us.
correct.
Thank you.
Well, I must have missed that email. Stephanie, did I misunderstand you the other day when you said to the superintendent that you thought you could close the gap to a small number, the 1.5?
When I said it to who did you say? Sorry.
Superintendent of schools? Tim?
In budget steering, yes, and I've said that to the select board that I'm confident I will come to you on February 3rd at your meeting with a 0 budget gap, a balanced budget.
Okay, thank you. Tish, can I share my screen? And Rob, Marion, I just want to give you the background why I think this is so important. That's me.
I don't think any of us are disputing that it's important, Joe. Right? We have said we will be thrilled to be able to fund these two firefighters if we have recurring and sustainable revenue sources to do so.
May I, Tish?
I'm sorry, Joe.
I want to share my screen.
You can share. You can
Okay.
share your screen.
Rob, can you see my screen?
We can.
Let me tell you why I believe this is so important and why I've stuck my neck out on this. I have to tell you, and I'm going to speak from experience, I have probably resuscitated 6 to 7 newborns in the delivery room. I probably resuscitated 12 or 15 pediatric child cases and over 150 adult cases. And when people say time is of the essence, seconds are of the essence. Now, this is from Criterion Associates of 2023. The red dot here is the Islington Fire Station. And the red dot here is the High Street Fire Station where our ambulance is based. The yellow areas that you see, it's a 4-minute response time from either of these stations. The green areas are 8-minute response times from either of these stations. Now, it takes 8 minutes for the fire truck to go from the Islington Fire Station down to east of Canton Street. So you see the streets, Blue Hill Drive, Endicott, Hemlock, Perry, a bunch of them, University Ave, Walker Road, Weatherby, etc. So all of the streets in this area, it's going to be at least 8 minutes to get there. Sometimes in the ICU, we have to turn off an IV, turn off the oxygen, and we do it pretty quickly. With an adult, I've got about 1 minute to get it right. With a pediatric case, maybe 30 seconds. And with a newborn, you rehearse, and you rehearse because you only have 10 seconds to restore it. So my concern, Rob, Marion, is if it takes 8 minutes to go from here down to here, I'm shooting from the hip, but I can pretty safely say it's going to be about 14, 15 minutes to go from the High Street Fire Station down to Perry or Hemlock or any of those streets. And if it's a pediatric case, on a windy day when MedFlight can't get up in the air, it's going to be 15 minutes to go from here to here, and probably another 20 minutes to get to a definitive pediatric emergency room. That's why I believe this is so important. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I'll answer some of your questions.
I think the question is still the question, right?
That's okay. That's okay.
So-
Let me, Rob, you were pretty excited about the Facebook thing. Yeah, I was frustrated, but in all honesty, I'm just looking at Mary Ann. You didn't hesitate on May 4th to respond to Neighbors in Action. While I am unable to engage in any deliberations of any kind on social media as a select board member, I am compelled here to provide some factual information. It didn't seem like it was verboten then, but I guess it is when I said something.
I think if I
second-
may just respond to that.
Sure.
Briefly, Joe, I was very careful with that post. I rarely post on Facebook, particularly on town matters, but as I indicated in that preface, I wanted to provide factual information. I wasn't discussing anything that had been discussed or deliberated upon. I wasn't discussing deliberations or any actions taken by my colleagues, but I felt that there was a factual issue that was being discussed, and I wanted to provide some facts.
Understood. And Rob, is in regards to the open meeting law, let me read this to you. Individual posts versus group discussion. While a single public body member posting about a topic on social media may not be an issue, engaging in discussion with other members of the quorum about the same topic could be a violation. So I'm not particularly worried about the open meeting law. I'm more concerned about getting the ambulance services that we need. And I'm gonna go right back to this $349,000 figure.
Joe,
Mr.
Oh, wait a
Chairman,
minute, wait a minute,
Mr.
wait a minute, wait a minute. I
Mr.
still
Chairman,
have, yeah, wait a minute, Pat. I still have the floor, Rob.
Okay, that's fine.
Go ahead,
Well,
Pat.
so point of order, I would advise you that select board members discussing things of the nature of the select board, like the budget in social media, could easily bring an open meeting law complaint. So I advise all of you against doing that.
So noted. You wanted to say something, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, so if you put something like that out there, Mary Ann, and what she was talking about was providing factual information. You were providing a perspective on something that you had put up that you didn't allow us to have any time in advance to have to vet it when we asked for that. And quite frankly, you're saying that we didn't listen. I listened quite closely. It was abundantly clear to me that despite the effort that you had made, you only got halfway home. And I said that in last week's meeting. So I was paying close attention despite the fact that it was only up on the screen for a very brief period of time. So I go back to, if you're halfway home with what you proposed, and I don't know that we are still halfway home based on some of the things that we've already discussed with respect to where that 2.5% is coming from, okay? That means there's gonna have to be other things cut. It's the immutable law of math that if you have a fixed pie and you want to increase the slice of one pie, then another slice has to be reduced by the according amount.
Now, back to your comment, Rob, about my petition article. And I said at that meeting, I'll say it again, let's not mix up. Let's not mix things that I'm trying to do for the seniors, that I'm trying to do for the residents of the town. Let's not put those together.
Hold on. Now, you are the chair of the select board, no?
Me?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, and the budget is squarely in our purview as a three-person board to put forward to the community. By adding an 11, it is our responsibility. We are the ones that set the direction for Stephanie and Chris and the rest of the leadership team for what our priorities are. Adding an 11th pickup is adding spending. Okay, so all I was saying was, you wanted a summer pickup. I respect that. I understand that. I appreciate you advocating for it. In the past, I've asked you, what do you want to cut to fund it? Yet you didn't want to cut anything. That's fine. That's your prerogative. All I'm saying is, as a fiscally responsible person, you want a summer pickup. At one point, we moved one from July into another part of the year where the tonnage was higher. Let's put one back into July and let's take the savings for whatever Todd negotiates and bring that in to help us fund other things or close the gap. That's all I'm saying. The point is the fact that you went to a citizen's petition article when something is 100% in the control and purview of the three of us is, in my mind, lunacy. Why would you do that? Why couldn't we have a conversation and find a way to get to a solution?
Can I
You
answer
have
that?
had control of the agenda since May.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
I spoke with our town administrator after being elected a few months. And if you recall, I held up the the capital budget book. And I said to him, I said, when we do the operational budget, I'd like to be part of that discussion. Do you recall that?
Joe, what do you think these discussions are? You're part of the discussion. You are the leader of the discussion.
No,
as the-
no, no, no. Let's back up
the
to
default position.
Rob. Hear me out.
Okay.
So then come February, when we go to vote the budget, I asked, what happened to my opportunity to discuss the DPW budget?
Did
I
we
don't
not?
think I was
did
given
we-
an opportunity.
So let's acknowledge that the only place we have to discuss this as a three-person board is right here.
I don't
There
disagree
were
with you.
several meetings that we would have had to have gone through in order to get to a place to present a budget to FinCom. So
And I trusted someone to communicate my request. Period. Now, what I really want to get to, wait, Rob, I'm still the
Okay.
chair here, so I
Sure,
get to
you
control the
got it, you got it.
dialogue.
I'm not interrupting you. Sorry.
Okay, so you had a problem with the fact that I did not request a funding source. I'm not obligated. It went to town council. Town
For a-
council approved it. I've submitted more petition articles than Carter's Got Pills. I've never been asked to provide funding other than from you.
Well, nobody in the history of the Commonwealth, as far as I know, was a sitting select board chair with direct control of the budget that turned and basically end ran their two colleagues and submitted a citizen's petition article for incremental spending without a funding source. It strikes me as irresponsible.
Well, I disagree because I asked, and Chris will tell you, I asked multiple times, can we get this done? Not once did I ever hear, let's put it on the agenda. Go ahead, Chris. I'm ready.
So I just want to say that, again, my name, my title Joe, you tend to use my name, my title quite a bit in your defense or your points that you're raising. As you know, as the chair, you have the greatest access to the agenda than any of the other board members as chair, because it starts with you and ends with you. If you wanted this on the agenda, you could put it on the agenda. What I said to you is what I said to any of the other two select board members or any of the prior board members. If you want to talk about the budget discussions will happen at the select board meeting, and you can talk about the budget there. When you raised the issue, the last time you raised the issue last year, when Rob asked you if you read the budget, you gave a response. I'm not going to say the response, but you gave a response. That would have been the time if you wanted to talk about that budget, and even the meetings prior to that when Stephanie was providing budget updates. So I have no problem being responsible for what I say and what I do, or even in some cases, what I don't say and what I don't do. But please, just make sure that what I shared with you is what you're sharing here.
If I've misrepresented anything, Chris, I humbly apologize.
Thank you very much, Joe.
All right. Before we open it up to the audience, anybody else want to make a comment? Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I would ask, what are we opening up to the audience? Are we giving any additional direction to Chris and Stephanie with respect, they're supposed to come to us on Monday with a balanced budget. You're still advocating strongly, as I respect you, you're advocating for these 2 additional firefighters. I understand that. I fully support the fire department, as does Mary Ann. I won't speak for her because we've all said that. We need a responsible and recurring sustainable revenue source to do so. So we have a choice. We either have to make some very specific cuts, and those things we can't do them all here tonight because, there are things we probably can't talk about when it comes to positions, people, etc. But there are things that need to be discussed and given to them as direction, because either we're trying to fit these 2 firefighters in the FY26 budget to the tune of $349,000, or we're moving towards Monday with a balanced budget that Stephanie is endeavoring to get to without trying to find an additional $349,000.
Well, my sense is that my zeal to add these 2 positions does not match your opinion on how to accomplish this. So I understand.
If there are things that we can agree on to get there, you know what? I would be on board, but I have not heard any proposals of any sort for how to basically make up for that $349,000.
I'm gonna go back to it again, Rob. I was working off of Stephanie's 92,000 that she had on that sheet, and Molly had in her letter. Molly, I think you went up to 186,000. That's what I was operating on.
But we now know that's a false premise to operate off of.
It sure sounds like it.
Okay, so we either have to find $349,000, or we have to say we cannot do this year without either some new growth that we don't have, or the only other alternative is to suggest an operational override, which I'm not in favor of.
Not either.
Okay,
So going forward, we'll be looking at $175,000 in the town budget for every firefighter.
if you are doing the straight, divide by 2 on the 350,
Yeah.
sure, that sounds about right, because
Okay.
you have, I assume you want to give them benefits, right? Not that I don't think that's an option not to. So, and we know that also comes with a commensurate overtime allocation as well. And so that is what has been put in front of us as the fully baked cost of adding those firefighters.
Okay. I don't have anything else to say.
Okay, let me ask Chris and Stephanie then, what do you need from us in terms of direction to get to Monday?
I am still just working as if I'm closing the budget gap as we've discussed. So I don't need anything further unless you're adding something tonight, but it doesn't sound like that's happening. So I'll just continue doing the work I am doing to come to you on Monday night with the proposed municipal budget for FY26 as it is right now for the select board to release, and move forward with budget discussions at FinCom based off that and coming up with a balanced budget. So unless something's changing, which it doesn't sound like it is, then I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing already.
And I just have one further comment that I'd like to make, or to underscore, if I may, which is what I said before about the need for us to work collaboratively. And I also want to make sure that residents are clear that the agendas of the select board come from the select board with assistance from the staff. And to the extent that something is or is not discussed at a select board meeting, that is on us. And that we have, an unbelievably dedicated staff that go above and beyond, particularly in the select board's office, everybody on this screen. But to the extent we have something that we want to discuss, it is on us to put it on the agenda, and we have the opportunity to do that, and particularly the chair that is directly involved in setting the agendas. That's where our agendas come from. And I just want to express thanks to our town administrator, Stephanie Molly, Tish, who does so much work for us, for all of the work that you do in assisting us with that work.
Thank you, Marianne. Rob, last bite of the apple before we go to the public.
Joe, when I talk about things as needing to have an offset to whatever the number is that you're looking to add on top of what the current budget is, I know there are a number of ways to try and get there. You'd either have to cut programs, and we know from prior presentations that 83% of the town municipal budget is people that deliver the services that are tied to those programs. There are other ways that you might get there that would have less personnel impact, but would have a significant impact on residents. An example, Steph, how much do we spend on yard waste pickup in total? Is it like $275,000, $300,000, something like that? Okay, so that could get you a long way there, Joe. I'm not proposing cutting that, but you could say, okay, that would have to become a paid service instead of a service provided by the town through taxation. I would never suggest that, because to me, that ends up being a regressive tax where it hurts those who can least afford it, right? If you're someone who can afford to have a lawn service come and blow and bag and remove your leaves, etc., if we turned it into a paid service, it wouldn't matter a bit to those types of people. But to people like you and I who actually bag and blow and rake our leaves ourselves and then have to pay to have them removed, that would be an added burden. And so I'm not putting that forward as a recommendation, but those are the types of things where they have specific dollar amounts associated with them that you would have to make trade-offs on in order to get to incremental spending that doesn't have a sustainable revenue source coming in with it. That's all I'm saying. And when I talk about those are the hard decisions that we have to make, those are the hard decisions that we have to make. I'm not trying to be difficult. It's not like I'm trying to stand in the way of these two firefighters. I'm trying to exercise the fiduciary responsibility and trust that the community has put in us to deliver a sustainable budget.
Thank you, Rob. Steph, I've looked through my emails, and I'm not very good at that sometimes, but I don't recall seeing that 376 figure. I'm sure I misplaced it. Could you please resend that to me? Thanks. Anything else, Rob? You're on a tear, man. Let's do it.
There's no other place for us to have a conversation, Joe. I'm just having a conversation in response to what we're talking about. That's all.
Okay. Marianne, anything else?
No, thank you.
Chris, if I besmirched your name, I apologize again. So I'm just trying to draw
Certainly
back on.
appreciate that, Joe. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Shoot, man, nobody's perfect. Tisha, is there anything in the queue? What do we have?
We have a lot, actually.
Yes, we have a few questions.
Would you be so kind? Oh,
Do you
man,
want me to take them one at a time?
please.
First one's from Nada Fabrizio, 32 Webster Street. Number one, it's long overdue for the host of these meetings to change its preferences and display everyone who is logged into this meeting, not just the host and panelist. Number two, I would like to know the current balances held in each of the FinCom's reserve account and the Select Board's reserve account. Additionally, I would like to learn how the money in each of these revenue accounts is spent and who is ultimately responsible on when and how much is spent. Does the Select Board expect $200,000 each year to be directed to its reserve account? Number three, what justified the purchase of an electric pickup truck for the police? Why does our police department need a pickup truck? Number four, why can't we live within our fiscal year 2025 budget, just like most responsible residents live, and Rob Gotti, who died and left you king? And then
Nobody
she
died,
goes
left me
on.
king. I'm just asking questions and making plain the questions that we have to ask each other and the decisions that we have to make.
I'm not going near that one, Rob.
Do you want me to answer
Don't
any
duck a
of the,
tough conversation, Joe.
I'm
Don't
sorry?
do you
duck
want me to
it.
answer any of the budget related
Sure.
questions or?
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Before you do, can I ask one question, Steph? At the end of the year, is any of the money from these, I think I counted 24 accounts, Rob, any of that money turned back to the town from the departments? Or is it all spent down to zero?
So each year you're provided in your packet, usually in June or July, with a year-end closeout budget to actual report with those exact details. I presented that at your August meeting of 2024. So any amount that is not spent in each individual department at the end of the year is turned back. It's closed out, and that goes towards free cash. It's not a lot as far as the municipal side of things, but say there was an unfilled position for 6 months out of the year in some department, and that salary is already built into the budget. Obviously, at the end of the year, there'd be an overage in that account, and that closes out and goes to free cash. It doesn't roll over to the next fiscal year.
Okay. And you don't have any idea what that was?
I can go back and find the report you were sent in that packet for the meeting that I presented on. I believe it was in August. I can definitely resend that to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, what's next in the questions there? Where are we? I'm sorry, this print is too small for me.
That's okay.
Oh, I thought I was going to answer some of the questions,
Oh,
but are
sure,
we
go
not
ahead.
doing
Yep.
that? I just want
Yep.
to make sure.
No, Steph, you're the expert. Go ahead.
Nope. So for the balances in the reserve accounts, the current budgets for those two this year and the current fiscal year are $355,000 for the Select Board reserve account. There has not been an approved voted reserve fund transfer this year to date. We usually use that account to do closeouts at the end of the year if any departments are over. Like I just said, I gave an example of why one might be under budget, but say someone retires mid-year and there's a large payout or something unexpected, or there is a reorganization of a department mid-year, we need to supplement those departments at the end of the year because we cannot legally overspend those accounts. So that's what that account has been used for traditionally in the past. On the FinCom reserve fund, the budget this year is $405,000. Nothing has been used to date. The FinCom needs to vote to use any of the funds in that reserve account. And usually, traditionally, what those have been used for, at least in the past couple of years, has been to supplement the snow and ice account. And that is could also be done as an Article 2 request at town meeting and voted on. And I don't know what the $200,000 each year to be directed to the reserve account for the Select Board is referring to, but the budget is $355,000 for the year.
Thanks, Stephanie. And just, I'm not showing off that I was paying attention to the morning that we spent together going over some of this, but isn't this a percentage of the town's overall budget? In keeping with the fiscal policies?
Yes, so the FinCom reserve account is supposed to be, I want to say, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. It's a percentage of the net operating budget, correct?
Okay.
It's part of our financial policies.
Yep.
It is, I believe, legally required to have a reserve account. So that's what our FinCom reserve account is for, is unexpected and unanticipated situations.
Okay, but so the people at home know it's a percentage of the town's overall operating budget. That's how that number where it comes from.
Our financial policies state that it should be at least, I'm sorry, I don't have them in front of me. I don't want to misspeak, but those are
Okay.
posted online and anyone can go and read them.
No, I remember what you said. Okay, what have we, Steph, is there anything else you want?
Mr.
Tackle
Chair, the
here.
next question, Chief Silva is here with us.
I want to just make sure Steph's all set.
Oh, sorry.
Are you good, Steph? Okay, thanks, Chris.
So Chief Silva's here if you'd like him to respond
Sure.
to.
Yep. Jeff, would you care
question
to
three.
chime in on this?
Yes, sir. Let me just get my camera on here. I can't.
Chief, I'll reread the question. What justified the purchase of an electric pickup truck for police? Why does our police department need, in all caps, a pickup truck?
Sure. So, you know, we're a little late to the pickup truck implementation, if you will. If you look around at all the area departments, excuse me, you'll see that that's, you know, a vehicle that's commonly used, right? And if we just look historically, once upon a time, that was the Crown Victoria, right? That was the car that people used. And then you move to all-wheel drive vehicles or SUV vehicles. We have one pickup truck and we use it, you know, for lots of things. I mean, there are many, but some examples are traffic cones for accidents, temporary stop signs, you know, when we have to close an intersection, whether it's for a fire or the lights go out when we're waiting for signal to come. We trailer the speed sign, the larger speed sign trailer with it. We put the smaller speed signs in the back of it. That pickup truck is driven by the traffic officer, who's also our accident reconstructionist. So there's equipment that you need to have for accident reconstruction, and it doesn't make sense to go to the station to get the equipment out of a closet and then respond to the scene. So it's in a container in the bed of the pickup truck. You know, there's enough bicycles when we get recovered bicycles. I mean, there's just lots and lots of examples. The road race for Westwood Day. So that's, you know, a sampling of some of the why we use them, and police departments, you know, all over use them. And then why we went electric. We try to go electric or electric hybrid when we can, you know, for a number of reasons. I know, you know, climate warming, and that's a separate political topic for people, but, you know, we're a green community. That's, you know, that's neutral, right? That's our town's policy, that we're part of the green communities. And so we try to go electric or hybrid when we can. Some of the benefits to that, other than the mandate, you know, we get federal and state rebates for those vehicles. We reduce the carbon footprint. It's a gas savings. We've, you know, our gas budget, you know, continues to go down incrementally through the use of electric and electric hybrid vehicles. The entire administrative or detective fleet, and now almost the entire patrol fleet is either electric or gas electric hybrid. Maintenance on the vehicles are much less. On average, there's about 2,500 moving parts in a mechanical engine of a cruiser. In an electric vehicle, there's the whole vehicle. There's 250 moving parts. And so many estimates, it ranges. I've seen as low as a year and a half. I've seen as high as just over 2 years. But the payback between fuel and maintenance on an electric vehicle to a gas vehicle, when you can do it, is less than 2 years. And we keep our vehicles well over 2 years. You can't do it across the fleet because they're emergency responder vehicles. So that's why we have some gas electric hybrid vehicles, but some are full electric, and this happens to be one of them. So now I think that's a general answer. I don't want to talk all night about it, but I'll answer anyone's question about it, of course.
Well, you're certainly enthusiastic enough, so thank you for that response, Jeff.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well done.
Joe, may I just clarify the FinCom question for everybody?
Wait a minute. Yeah, but I'm gonna need some help with the rest of that question. Go ahead, Rob.
Sure thing. With respect to our financial policies as it relates to the FinCom reserve, our
Oh, yeah.
financial policies state that an annual operating budget shall include an appropriation to an operating reserve fund. This account, the Finance and Warrant Commission Reserve, shall be used to fund any unforeseen and extraordinary expenses that occur during the fiscal year. Funds are transferred to individual departments during the year only upon the recommendation and vote of the Finance and Warrant Commission. The minimum annual appropriation to this account is should be between 0.3 or 0.5% of the general operating fund budget, net of debt service.
Thanks, Rob. But it is the fact what I tried to nail down, it is spelled out in our financial policies. It's
Yes,
just
sir, it
not
is.
arbitrary. Okay. Rob, do you want to take a stab at Nada's last question within our FY 2025 budget? I can't answer that.
I think we are living within our FY 25 budget. As we've said, there are, as we are looking at our FY 26 budget here tonight, what we are doing is, Stephanie has presented a number of times that fixed costs are up by, 9%, which is putting enormous pressure on our operating budget. So we are trying and doing all that we can to live within that budget. And I have the utmost faith in Stephanie that she's going to come back with things that will help us close that budget gap dramatically and all the way, hopefully, to the end, because I know there's some things that typically we get later in the cycle. I think things like in health insurance and maybe the Blue Hills piece come oftentimes in February or March. So there is some level of uncertainty around some of those things. And obviously, schools with respect to a teacher's contract as well. So Steph, am I missing anything in response to the number 4 in Ms. Fabrizio's question?
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Steph. Thanks, Rob. What's the next one, Tish?
Okay. Here's another question from Nada. The minimum recommended amount of money in a municipality's free cash account by the Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, is 16.7% of the prior year's operating budget. This equates to roughly 18 million. From what I see, we have about 14 million in our free cash account, yet we continually want town meeting to agree with appropriations from the free cash account like it is not a big deal, and it certainly is.
So I'll happily take this one as well, Joe,
Okay,
because
Rob.
according
Thanks.
to our town financial policies, the town will maintain adequate working capital in the general fund and seek to refrain from using available fund balance equivalent to 4% of the general operating fund budget. Specifically, the town will strive to maintain free cash at 4% of general operating net of debt service. This balance of free cash will provide sufficient cash flow to meet payroll and expenditures without having to borrow in anticipation of tax receipts, as well as serve as liquid funds that can be used in case of emergencies. So we typically have, and Stephanie, keep me honest here, in years past, we have typically had roughly $8 million, give or take, in our free cash budget, which we then typically spend about half on capital, one-time capital purchases to maintain our capital assets. And this year, we happen to have $14 million because we were sitting on the money that came in as part of the borrowing for the Pine Hill at a time when we are experiencing high interest rates, and this one works in our favor. So we were able to accrue more interest that ultimately closes out to free cash. That's my understanding. That's the answer that I would like to give, but I would like to have Stephanie clarify anything if I've misspoken. And
No,
by the way-
I don't need to clarify. I'm not sure where the 16.7 from the GFOA comes from. All the guidance I received from the GFOA as well as the Massachusetts Department of Revenue states that town should aim to maintain that fund balance or free cash at 3 to 5% of the annual budget. So the town's policies in Westwood are 4% of the general fund operating budget net of debt service. So we're well within those ranges. I'll kind of plug for the town too that we receive a national award from the GFOA every year. So I'm assuming we're staying within their policies, and I'm confident on that.
And most importantly, that maintenance of the funds and the financial policies that we have in place when the rating agencies come in and rate us for our bond rating. This is a big part of why we have a AAA bond rating, which keeps our borrowing costs down.
That's correct. Yes.
All right. Tish, I got this a little low. I think I can read it. This is Fran Fusco, 20 Pine Lane. I asked the question back in 12225 twice to Stephanie, trying to brainstorm on where we could save money. I want to hear from Stephanie, what is the budget for town personnel vehicles? How many vehicles are in the budget? And what does that include? Gas, repairs, insurance, etc. I'm not talking police, fire chief cars. Why can't this be cut to save money? It should be not be part of the personnel contract. As a Westwood taxpayer, I'd like an answer.
Would
Okay,
you
so-
like me to answer that?
Please, yeah.
So I think it's personal vehicles. Certain members of the town have vehicles that at times they might take home. So I guess I would consider those personal vehicles. That includes the town administrator, the director of DPW, the assistant director of DPW, the director of facilities maintenance, and a lieutenant in the police department. I'm happy if someone sends me a request, I can try to do a detail on exactly what would be spent each year on gas and repairs of those vehicles. Don't have that tonight, though, sorry. And then also there are multiple staff members throughout town, such as in the recreation department, the building department, the conservation department, health, that use town vehicles throughout the day to go to job sites, go to buildings, and do their work. So I can try to gather that information, but it's a lot. So if someone could just submit it in a request to the town as a records request, and I can gather that.
Thank you, Steph. I'm gonna give this another shot, Tish. This is Nada from Webster Street. Library trustees with us per Marianne. I would like to see that.
Joe, I think I can respond.
Okay,
Uh,
thanks.
By that, I meant I can see in the queue of folks attending that we do have a couple of library trustees with us, and I actually see further down in the chat that there was a response from one of the library trustees, Mary Macy Phelps. I'm happy to read that, Joe, if you like.
Sure, that'd be great, thanks.
This is Mary Macy Phelps, 295 Clappertree Street. Thank you for the thoughtful discussion and taking the time to understand the potential budget impacts on the library and other departments. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings and Mr. Gotti have raised a number of important points for consideration in order to make a fiscally responsible decision for the town. Ms. LeBlanc Cummings' statements about impacts to the library are consistent with my understanding of our obligations to meet state requirements and deliver library services to the town. As one member of the library trustees, I would respectfully defer to our library director and to the full board of trustees to further detail or discussion in accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law.
Thanks, Marianne.
You bet.
Tish, what are we down to? Is this something about chat disabled? Nada, why is my script? I can't, I don't know the answer to
The
that.
chat is always disabled. We use the Q&A function to be able to receive questions from attendees. The chat is not available to anyone because it is where Zoom bombers take.
Yep, got it. Thanks, Rob. What's next, Tish?
This is a question from Fran Fusco. How can budget be at deficit of 1.5 million and now Stephanie is confident she can have a balanced budget?
Great. So this isn't unusual for there to be a budget gap. Say when we started these conversations about the budget, it was back in November and December. So at that time, there's a lot of things still outstanding. We hadn't received our final pension assessment number. We hadn't received state aid. I have all those updates that I'll be giving to the board on Monday. We further review what we're estimating for local receipts. I go through one more time and do cuts to anywhere that we possibly can. This is a normal process. We call it a budget process. It doesn't just take one day. It's over the course of many months. So I'm confident because it's part of my job to do that, right? So this is a normal thing each year. Last year, when we started the budget process, it was about $1 million gap. We got there. I'm communicating the select board on what my ideas on that are, and that's sort of what I'll be, or it is what I will be reviewing on Monday night with them and going through those steps. So I will walk through exactly what I'm doing to get there.
Thank you, Steph. All right, Tish, what are we down to? Oh, man.
We're down to additional comment from Nada. Would you like me to read it or would you like to read it?
Please, please.
Okay. With respect to our emergency personnel response time, thank you to our previous select board members poo-pooing a fire substation when developing University Avenue. Also, shortly thereafter, they had poo-pooed opening the fire road strictly for emergency access. Thanks to pushback from residents in the area, and I quote, one resident was opposed merely because her kids had their basketball net in the middle of the established fire road using a public way as if it was a private way. Outrageous.
Okay, so noted. Mary Marcy. Okay, we getting close to the end here, Tish? Why?
Yeah. And that question was read by Mary Ann.
Yep, yep,
Smash
okay.
it up, so that was done.
Uh, Is it Fran? Who's next?
Fran Fusco, why is it Joe Privateer's job to come up with line items? Why didn't Stephanie McManus and Chris Coleman come with a list?
I'm happy to take that question, Mr. Chair, if you'd like.
Thanks, Chris.
Ms. Fusco, thank you for your question. And just to inform Ms. Fusco and others watching, we have ongoing communication with the select board members regarding the operating budget. And often those, well, most of the time they're in this public session, but we also have individual conversations. So there were individual conversations with select board members. There were suggestions provided during those individual communications. And we provided that information for the board to have their conversation as a board at the January 22nd meeting, at which we were looking for the guidance from the board. So we can then look to present that budget at February 3rd. So we do provide suggestions and ideas to the board. Again, this is the board's budget. They have to have their conversation in open forum, which they have. And that's how we come up with, or that's how the board will come up with their recommendations and their guidance for us.
Thank you, Chris. Is that it, Tish?
There's a few more. Maureen White, 568 Canton Street. It's unfortunate you're not allowed to discuss things amongst each other because of the quorum rules regulations. Maybe we should consider adopting there be 5 select board members. That being said, can the funds being used to advance the Canton Street project to 75% design be pulled back and put towards the town's deficit, given the political climate at the moment with the current administration potentially decreasing federal funding?
Marianne, that was,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, Marianne, wait, let me think about this for a second, who can best
I
answer?
just wanted to add point of order,
Sure,
Joe,
yep.
that there's a continuation from Maureen White, 2 down. Maybe it's best to read that at the same time.
Thanks,
Okay,
Marianne.
Maureen White, 568 Canton Street. To finish my question, the Canton Street project is federally funded at 80%. Do you have concerns regarding the funding? We've already spent 492,000 plus 250,000 with 402,000 remaining. If that is what remains, reconsider that expense. Thank you.
Oh, I see it, okay. Chris or Marianne, do you folks want to take a stab at that?
Well, I think, and actually I'll defer Pat to you as town council. I think it's a legal question as far as funds allocated by town meeting. Am I correct? Oh, you're on mute, Pat. Pat, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I was failing unmuting myself. So those funds are allocated. I also believe they are capital funds, but I'll defer to staff. So we generally don't use capital funds to fund operations. And those funds have been allocated by town meeting and voted by the select board to be used for what they're being used for. The select board would have to vote to not use them for that if they were inclined to do so.
Thank you, Pat. And just to underscore that point, those are one-time funds, so would not be used in the operating budget in any event.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Marianne. What's next, Tish?
The next question is from Clara Galkowski, but I don't see an address, so she would just be kindly enough to just put in her address. We can read that question. And the next one after that is
It's
Nada.
lower down, Tish, excuse me.
Lower down, okay.
Yep.
Okay, my address is 320 Dover Road. Okay, great. Thanks, Claire. Claire Galkowski, why does the cost for each additional firefighter include so much overtime? Wouldn't the need for OT be reduced with additional staff? Also, I didn't hear any mention of scrutiny of the DPW budget.
I guess I'll take a stab at the first part is that I'm sure it's a contractual thing on the overtime, but if the fire chief's here, perhaps he can answer, but I'm not sure any of us can answer that question. And as far as scrutiny of the DPW budget, I can't answer that either.
Let's continue on. So Nada just writes, thank you, Chief Silver, much appreciated. And another question or another comment from Nada. Additionally, I would like to learn how the money in each of these reserve accounts is spent and who is the ultimate authority on when and how much is spent. And then she continues on, it seems like we always have extra cash at fiscal year end, which is directed to free cash. It's not free. Those are our tax dollars. Thank you. I have read our financial policies. That's all from Nada.
I can't give any examples of how the money's been used. Chris, can you?
I'm sure, Stephanie, I'm happy to add or start, however you'd like.
I think the last two off the top of my head, in FY24, the select board requested, or they used their account to reserve fund transfer to fund a traffic study. In FY23, there was a restructuring during the year of our human services division. So that account, that department needed a closeout transfer to that. It's all public. I post at the end of the year what the breakdown is. I can get that. It's all done to do projects that come up or to close out department budgets with mid-year adjustments that happened, and it's all publicly done, and we go in from the select board. The recommendation either comes from myself or department head or Chris, and then the select board is the voting authority, though. They are the ones that decide whether that transfer should be made, and they vote on it, and then that's done.
And it's voted at a public meeting.
Yes, that's correct.
Chris, I think
Can I just add on to that, Stephanie? So there's two venues. There's one is the select board meeting, what Stephanie's talking about, also town meeting. So as Stephanie previously responded to a question talking about Article 1 or Article 2, the select board reserve could be used in one of those venues as one of those articles.
The FinCom reserve, Chris, is usually what's used in those.
Yes, the FinCom reserve as well, but the FinCom is very similar. Town meeting, and it's up to town meeting to vote that.
And if I could just add, free cash is, I don't know who came up with that term. It's a terrible term. It's the town's retained earnings. And I appreciate the comment. It's not free. It's our retained earnings as a town. And if we want to use it, we go to town meeting, and we have an article to use it for spending. And as we've heard, our financial policies require us to maintain a certain level of free cash.
And money is not directed towards free cash. It's a balance sheet calculation done by the Department of Revenue based on our deficits, our turn back. So it's not something that we allocate funds towards, and it is definitely not free. completely agree with that, and it is taxpayer money at the end of the day. That is why every dollar is approved by town meeting before it's spent.
It's definitely a misleading title, but this is what's come from the Commonwealth.
Shocking. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Marianne. Are we done, Tish?
Almost. A few more questions. Nada, comment from Nada. She says, please prepared Fran Fusco to pay $500 for your public records request. And then one more additional from Claire Galkowski. No answer from the DPW budget. That's quite unsatisfying. 320 Dover Road. And then one more from Francesco, 20 Pine Lane. I think it is quite unfair. I've been told to fill out a FOIA request for the question on the cars that are given to town employees to use. I've asked 2 times before tonight for an answer and have still not received an answer. And then
Oh,
Nada says-
I wasn't referring to a FOIA request. I just meant, send an email to myself directly to me. It just might take a little bit of time to gather that data, and I certainly wouldn't be charging for it.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Joe, that's it, but you do have one hand raised.
Joe,
Yeah,
before
it's
you go to
raised
the
from
hand
Kathy
raise,
Wallace.
if you'd like.
Oh, wait a minute. In an effort to read this stuff. Wait a minute, we missed one thing. The DPW thing. Anybody want to answer that?
I mean, I can just kind of run through some of the big items that are inside of the $566,000. That is the expense line of the Department of Public Works budget. They've got vehicle maintenance at 65 grand. Todd can tell you that can vary year to year. He does a great job of managing all of these things because as I read them, the categories you will understand can have variation from year to year. Vehicle maintenance of $50,000. Equipment for hire, I assume that is oftentimes other equipment that we don't have and we don't maintain as part of our fleet. Uniforms, boots, clothing, waste oil removal is like $2,500. Tree removal is $35,000. Police details, which they need oftentimes when they're doing work, is $40,000. Stormwater testing, 15 grand. Traffic marking, $65,000. Groundskeeping supply, 15 grand. Gasoline, 90 grand. So as I go through the sand and gravel, 3 grand. Signs, $15,000. Cemetery, $20,000, and general supplies, 12 grand. So
Rob, before you go, that was great. But before you go through the whole thing, is this available to the public on the portal? Anybody?
The municipal budget document, which once approved by the board
Whatever
on
Rob is reading
Monday,
from.
will be posted.
So it will be available to the public on the town's website, Stephanie?
Yep, we post the municipal budget book every year on the town's website once the board has released it by approving the proposed budget.
And that's what you were reading from, Rob?
Yep.
Okay. I think this is the last one. Nada says after the fact. Could be. Mary and Rob, you guys have anything else you want to say?
You will see a proposed budget. You will see a proposed budget when we vote it and when it goes to FinCom, and FinCom will properly vet it, and then you will vote it as a member of the public at our annual town meeting. That is in response to the question from Nada that says the public should be able to see a proposed budget. You will.
All right, and Tish, I think I skipped over other business that may come before the board. Is there any other business that may come before the board?
You do have a resident who has their hand raised.
Oh,
Kathy Wallace.
I don't see it, but would you be so kind?
In the attendees list, Joe.
Yeah. Would you like to allow her to speak? She just have to, if she could just state her address. Hold on one moment. There's Miss Wallace.
Good evening, everybody. I'm assuming you can hear me. If you just give me a nod that you can hear me. My address is 283 Farm Lane. This meeting is an embarrassment. Joe is attempting to do the job that he was elected to do. I looked at my agenda. The agenda said FY26 budget. I became hopeful that we might fund the 2 firefighters that we so desperately need. There's nowhere on the agenda that it says, let's double team Joe and let's talk about a social media post when there have been other social media posts made by select board members. This is a travesty for the residents of Westwood. We're looking for 2 firefighters. We're not asking for the Taj Mahal. We just built a $91 million school. I think it's a reasonable request to fund public safety that was not funded last year. I looked at these numbers, what number was it? $349,000 all of a sudden for 2 firefighters that a week ago was $185,000. I think your numbers are inflated intentionally. I looked through the budget book. I mean, I'm looking at page 56 of the 2024 annual report, and it says a lieutenant with 10 years of experience is $97,000. I took the total cost from page 8 of the 2024 book, $5,994,555 total cost for the fire department. Divided it by 45, which I think is about the right number. That would include the chief and the assistant chief as well. I came up with a total of 133,000. So why we're inflating numbers just to make a dramatic point saddens me. You make it impossible for residents to get information. You tell everybody to FOIA and then you charge for FOIA. That deprives us of transparency and it leads to results like tonight. I am ashamed at what's transpired. I am encouraged by the participation that residents came here tonight with. I think that's extremely important. We are at a precipice here where we want to approve a fire station, desperately needed fire station for a desperately understaffed fire department. This display did not help that cause, not one bit. I think we may, if the numbers are all correct, that the direct service providers, DPW, fire, police, there's no room there, then maybe we need to start looking at administrative positions that don't provide direct service to residents. Taxes are too high. That is an undisputable fact that I think a very high percentage of this town would agree with. So this is a shame. If you're able to talk, through Chris offline, why wasn't this discussed offline with Joe? If you can do that, which I know that you can. So these numbers are inflated. I find it disingenuous that we get told a week ago, there's $1.5 million budget deficit, but we'll close it in a week. What do you have, a magic wand? I mean, what are we giving up to do that? That was never covered in a public meeting. And I'd like to see specifics on that. I'd like to know, what do we pay in legal fees as a town? I think it's excessive. There was a significant case at the school department, and I just think it's excessive what we pay. Nobody commented on, I asked about the raises. Did we input those unilateral raises because we did a study? I think it was $266,000. Molly, can you answer that? Did those raises just go through unilaterally for everybody? And do I have the number right? Molly?
I have to refer to Mr. Chair, would you like me to answer that question?
Please.
The classification compensation study was implemented on January 1st. The implementation cost for that study was approximately $132,000.
For half a year, correct? So if you double that for FY26, the impact would be double that, 266,000. No? Tell me why I'm wrong.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Well, Chris was shaking his head.
I will say that's incorrect, because what
Okay.
happens,
What is the correct number?
well, I'll explain to Kathy. So what happens is that coverage of the 130, worst case scenario, 132,000 will cover from January 1st to June 30th. From July 1st to June 30th for the next fiscal year, that'll be any step increase or general wage increase that those employees are eligible for. So it won't go from 132 to 264.
What will it be for 26? What is the impact in FY26?
I don't have that number with me, but we'll have that as part of the presentation on February 3rd.
But that's too late. I want residents to know that there has to be something that can help to get 2 firefighters, which last week cost 185,000. It makes no sense to me that you have to put overtime in for adding bodies to a staff. It would seem to me when you're not increasing how many we're going to fund at a minimum, we're going to stay at 9 minimum. So I don't see why overtime gets added into that. And Chris, I have a question for you. What can you tell me about the SAFER grant application for this year?
Point of order, Mr. Chair, where are we?
Oh,
on the
wait,
2
wait,
minutes?
wait, wait a minute. Kathy,
Where are we on the 2 minutes?
yeah, we're at the limit, so you've got a question to Chris on the SAFER grant, and I'll give you the opportunity to ask one more question.
Thank you.
The SAFER grant, we have not received any information regarding when that will open. We are hopeful based on some information we received from the federal, from our federal representatives, that certain grants that we were told may not be open are now subject to being open. So we're waiting for that information.
Thank you.
Okay. The last thing I'd like to say, Joe, is if we're committed to funding this public safety and fire, I would think you would have more specific information about the SAFER grant. I spoke to FEMA on Monday. I called, they answered the phone on the first ring. They said it might open as soon as this Monday. I asked if the money was there, would it had been funded, or would Congress have to fund it? The money's there. The bad news is it went down by 9%. So there's only 342 million for the entire country. Last year, Massachusetts had 60 cities and towns apply. 5 were awarded. So last week we were hoping we would get a SAFER grant. I'm not hoping because it doesn't even look like there's any activity happening from town administration on this. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm angry. I'm sorry. I needed to express it. This is a travesty to not do 2 firefighters. Everybody needs to think about that. Was it all worth it? Was it worth it?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it. Is there anything else, Tish?
I'm on mute.
Wait a minute.
Claire Galkowski, I agree with Nader. I'd like to see the proposed fiscal year 26 budget before February 3rd also. That's it.
I'm not sure how to, I think, isn't Stephanie still working on it, Chris?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right. Certainly been one of our longer meetings. Let me do this. Mary Ann, Rob, do you guys have anything else you want to say? Jeff, thanks for hanging in there, man.
Yeah.
My
I'd like to
pleasure.
say- Go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, I do. I simply want to say that I think we want to close this meeting on our terms. That I think we had a good discussion tonight. I think it was a necessary discussion. I think and I hope that we're recommitted to really talking about our issues in a very frank manner in this forum, this open forum. It is the only forum we have to discuss, and I hope that's where we will keep our deliberations going forward and support one another to bring forward ideas, and let's hash them out in these meetings. That's why we're here. I think this is, while our discussions can be difficult, that's the job. And I think it's healthy. So I appreciate the discussion that we've had tonight and the thoughtfulness that went into the discussion.
Thanks,
I'd
Mary.
also I'd like to add to that I'd like to make sure that it's clear that there was no inflation after the fact. The fact of the matter is, we knew at least a week before the last presentation was made, where it was $188,000 that was put up on screen, that the number was 346. If that was missed, that's, not on the town staff. They communicated.
Thank you, Rob.
And it's the same amount that was budgeted last year, because of course benefits have to go into the budget as well.
All right. Chris, anything else would you like to say before we wrap this up?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for helping out tonight. Molly, any last minute thoughts? Pat? Okay. And the true genius of running this meeting, Tish, anything else?
No additional questions. You're all set.
Well, let's go while the going's good. Anybody want to make a motion, Mary Ann?
What do you do? Next meeting is Monday, 6
February
PM.
3rd, yep. February 3rd, 6 PM via Zoom. Thanks, Rob.
With that, I will move to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, Mary Ann,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you to all for participating and thanks for staying online. Appreciate it. Good night, folks.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.